joining us for this episode. This comes as a special treat. Mr. Brock Pierce here has graciously cut a lot of time out of his schedule to sit down with us and discuss a few things. And for one, I'm hugely fascinated. I've been a fan of what he's been involved in over the years, as well as his motivation. And cheerleader in this space for sure. I'm joined by my friend Rob from Digital Asset News Channel. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. He puts out a lot of good and positive news as well. But Brock, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, man.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. One of the things that I really just want to get out of the way first that has always fascinated me about following you through cryptocurrency is how you got here. You had a movie career prior, and then all of a sudden you became a larger than life figure in the crypto world, and it was quite the journey. But if you could maybe just let everybody know, what that story's about, that would be really great.
Yeah, so I'm a kid from Minnesota originally, and I grew up playing video games. And having been a byproduct of the first generation of young people that had computers and internet connections, I was, very active and had a view of how technology was going to change the world. And so I quit acting at the height of my career at 16 to start my first internet company back in 1997 in the midst of the dot-com boom. And I was buying and selling and trading Magic the Gathering cards and baseball cards and things of that nature. And so I discovered in 1999 the first multiplayer games where you could buy and sell digital currency or digital assets inside of these persistent sort of gaming worlds. And in 2000, 2001, I set up a business to become the main market maker for currencies in games like World of Warcraft and Second Life. And the demand for those currencies was so great that we had to build an industry to produce more of it. And so we set up an operation in China in 2001, 2002. We built up a supply chain of about 400,000 people that would play video games professionally to mine digital currencies that we would sell all over the world. We were PayPal's largest merchant for years. We were instrumental in the launching of Alipay. We rolled up the world's businesses. We had over 95% market share in South Korea. We did $10+ billion of business in that space in the 2000s prior to Bitcoin. And so having run those experiments and played around with, testing economic theories inside of gaming environments, we wanted to see if these same sort of ideas could be implemented and rolled out in the analog world. And that's why things like Bitcoin were so fascinating. And that's how I got my start in that space.
Is that really, and you're very early on. What was the first time you heard about Bitcoin? Because obviously you had preparation for it being, from the gaming experience. But when did you actually hear about Bitcoin? You were like, wow, this is really similar. I've been doing this already.
Yeah, so as we started to dominate the world's digital currency markets in games, we were looking at, call it other asset classes. And so I was very involved in looking at secondary markets for frequent flyer miles, American Express points, gift cards, looking at alternative community currencies. Wired magazine, I think in December 2008, called me the godfather of digital currency and did this sort of huge spread, obviously, 1 month before Bitcoin launched. And so it's always kind of been on my radar pretty early. And my view of Bitcoin early on was this, or something like it, is clearly the future. The question is when? When will that lightning in the bottle strike? When will adoption start to kick in? And it wasn't until 2012 that I was like, okay, this is happening now. The future is now. I need to drop everything else I'm doing to focus on what's happening here full time. And that's when I really kind of took the final plunge and tried to sell all my other businesses, tried to get out of everything else just to free up time. And then I started building businesses in this field, about one new company every 45 to 60 days. We started Blockchain Capital, the first venture fund in the space dedicated to the ecosystem, where I was a managing partner for funds 1, 2, and 3. We started Tether. We created the first crypto bank, Noble Bank. We started GoCoin. I was buying Mt. Gox. I mean, the long list of businesses until I got to a point where I can't manage 12 companies at once effectively. And so then really focused all my time on venture. And through that process, the last thing I did in venture was tokenize Blockchain Capital's third fund with BCAP, because I viewed security tokens as something that might have potential one day. After doing that, left to go get involved with the creation of Block One and the launching of EOS. But we did Mastercoin, where we invented the ICO. I mean, a lot of stuff. More projects than is probably worth getting into.
I'm surprised you don't have gray hair.
Yeah, Brock, you have to be kind of like me after all those efforts and works. But I get it. I totally understand. I think just like entrepreneurship, I can see it's definitely ingrained into you, just like all other entrepreneurs that are out there. So I appreciate that. But I do see some similarities. Like you see a problem, then you say there's an opportunity for this problem. I'm going to fix that problem, and then off you go. So everything that I just heard was the exact same thing that most entrepreneurs talk about. Here's a problem, I'll fix it. Here's a business. So now you're going into venture capitalism. Tell us about that. Why you went into that direction as opposed to, like you just said, I've only got so much time. I got 12 businesses. I can't do it all.
Well, so having achieved some financial success in my 20s, one of the things that entrepreneurs often do is we start to pay it back or pay it forward as an angel investor. And so angel investing is something I'd been focused on, and I had been building another venture fund before I stopped everything in 2012 to go full-time into, call it crypto and blockchain. And so I was already well on my way to becoming a venture capitalist. And so it was an obvious next step. I believe in kind of experiencing development of innovation from all of its perspective. I've been an angel, an entrepreneur, an advisor, and the venture capital side is where I thought I could provide the most assistance to the ecosystem. Obviously, capital formation is core to the development of an industry. I saw lots of startups emerging. I saw lots of ideas and entrepreneurs coming together. The ICO market had not taken off. It was something we had just been experimenting with. And one of the things that was clearly needed was venture capital to help fund these businesses. And most of the VCs in Silicon Valley, when I went and talked to them, they didn't believe in crypto. Most of them would just talk negatively about it. And so I recognized that we needed a bridge to get the ecosystem's development to the next phase. And that was around capital formation. And so helped fund lots of businesses, from Coinbase to Kraken to BitGo, and the list goes on and on.
Makes sense. You know what? So I see you are looking into the future and you're saying, okay, this is the things that I want to actually get into. But right now, the industries that you're looking, because you've already worked with all these huge industries and you want to go into venture capitalism. I was listening to Anthony Pompliano on his show. He had Kevin O'Leary, and he talks about being an investor for new types of industries that he hasn't gotten into before. One of those was he's talking about psilocybin for the medical industry, not cannabis, but getting into mushrooms as far as like microdosing and how it could change a lot of things as far as like the medicinal side of those, which I thought was very odd coming from O'Leary. But it did make a lot of sense because he said, we're going to go in one direction where we've already got FDA, we're going through FDA approval, and this is what I want to get into right now on top of the other things that he's doing. So when we talk about these different industries, what are you looking at as far as venture capitalism?
Well, I'm invested in the psilocybin industry and have been for the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's pretty public that Brendan Bloomer, the CEO of Block One, and Mike Novogratz of Galaxy Digital, and I think it's public. Please forgive me if I'm sharing information we shouldn't, but we all funded a company called Atai, which has a majority ownership in a company called Compass, which has the patents on synthetic psilocybin for the United States. And so we've all been investing in that ecosystem the last few years. So I'm a believer in that too. Well, I believe that right now, health is obviously of major importance. And coming out of COVID, mental health in particular. And so psilocybin has been showing a very effective, it's showing to be an effective treatment for addressing issues like PTSD, which is not just a military issue, but it's an issue that exists throughout the whole world, especially in light of what the year 2020 has done to the world. I'm also a substantial donor on the philanthropic side to an organization called MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychoactive Studies. They're the ones that have been leading all the trials and testing around MDMA therapy, which also looks like it may be an effective treatment for PTSD as well. On the Atai side, I think business is so invested heavily, and I think it owns the patents on the R isomer of ketamine for treating depression. And so I recognize that innovation, right? The world has a lot of problems. And as you put it, you know, where there's a problem, there is also an opportunity. And so the world has a lot of problems. And I think the only path forward for us as a society is to innovate our way out of this mess. And so I'm constantly looking at innovative solutions to the world's problems.
Now, you know, I love the path we just took, because a lot of people who know you from afar see you gracing the stages at various digital asset conferences and wearing the, you know, a trademark hat and doing all this stuff. But what a lot of people don't know is all these other things that you're involved with. I mean, first and foremost, you're a capitalist business owner, right? And you have your hands in all these various different projects, and not necessarily all in crypto. What are some of the other things that you're involved with as well that's outside the digital asset space?
So as part of my running for president, or as part of my path into civil service, you know, I look at the world from that 70,000 foot perspective, from the perspective of governance, from the perspective of government, and what are the things, the core pillars, you know, from an infrastructure perspective to support a thriving society. And so right now, a lot of my time is spent looking at things like telecommunications, looking at things like food security, and solving, you know, agricultural needs. How do you are what you eat? How do we produce more healthy food at scale so that we can have better health, you know, or wealth, which is really our health? Looking at things like renewable energy, looking at, again, innovation, but broadly in terms of supporting startup ecosystems and the development that comes from it, trying to solve problems that can't be solved capitalistically, and trying to find ways to support them philanthropically, a lot of real estate development. I mean, I really try and look at things, call it from a civilization redesign perspective. I try to envision what the world could look like in 30, 40, you know, by the year 2030 or the year 2040 or the year 2050. And then having a vision of our collective future, then working backwards in trying to understand what is the path to get there? What are the, you know, call it the sequence of events that will get us to a thriving new world?
Yeah, those interesting views lead me into what you just brought up, which was your presidential run. I mean, you obviously have a personal platform that you've set up and what your beliefs are, and how you think things should shape up. Tell us give us a little insight into, one, what made you run for president, and two, what was that experience like? Because it's a very unique experience.
Yeah, well, I can summarize why I ran for office in one word. That's love. Love for this country, love for the American people, love for humanity, you know, and life in general. And I believe we're doomed if we don't do something different. I believe we have a very real mess on our hands, and innovation is the answer. There are 21st century solutions to our 21st century problems. And it requires people that understand and have a vision of the future, that have the foresight to navigate the opportunistic but challenging road ahead. And I'm not the sort of person that just sits on the sidelines. When I see a problem and I see a solution, I do something about it. I roll up my sleeves and I do the hard work. I view myself as someone, I live my life in service. And so that's why I did it. This first phase of the process was just an exploratory one. I announced my candidacy for president of the United States on July 4th as an independent candidate, which is an auspicious day for independence, obviously. And so I believe I've completed basic training. I now understand how to run for not just office, but run for president. And I can tell you how rigged the system is. This data point alone will tell you all you really need to know, but I could talk to you for hours. To run for president of the United States as a Democrat or a Republican, you need 25,000 petitions or signatures. As an independent candidate, you need 700,000. Every election cycle, the bar gets higher and higher for independent candidates or third-party candidates. They're trying to prevent the American people from having third choice, to have any other options beyond red or blue. I also ran a non-negative campaign. I believe there was plenty of people talking negatively in the media. It's not something that I needed to add to the equation. I think my time was better spent focused on solutions and discussing the things that the American people, I think, would benefit from hearing. And so I entered the arena, the ultimate arena, the Coliseum of Coliseums, and I left largely unscathed. I left better than I entered and got more press or media than any other third-party candidate other than Kanye West, who was not taken seriously. The media actually took everything I had to say very seriously. I think because I brought enough credibility, having done enough in my life, that people were willing to entertain these new ideas. And because I wasn't talking negatively, neither the left or the right, the Democrats or the Republicans, started throwing stones at me. I actually left not having made enemies on either sides. Both the Democratic and Republican parties are actively courting me. I left as a neutral, positive actor, this doesn't happen. I ran a very unusual campaign, and I learned, I think, what I needed to learn. My basic training is complete, and this was just the beginning. My foray into civil service and American politics is just beginning.
So Brock, great story. When you talk about being a third-party candidate, and you were there with Jesse Ventura, he was the same thing, third-party candidate. He got to be the governor of Minnesota. What kind of words of wisdom did he depart to you to say, this is what's going to happen, this is the path forward, this is what you need to do to expand on this experience?
Yeah, it's actually worth watching the press conference that Jesse Ventura and I had together, because there was a lot of chemistry between the two of us. I mean, literally, we're like fist pumping, going back and forth and back and forth. And that interview was the first time that Jesse Ventura took questions from the press since leaving as governor. Literally, he did something unprecedented. He got so excited in that process. And when the media asked him, they're like, well, but what about throwing your vote away? He's like, what, like the 38% of Minnesotans that threw their vote away on me? Oh, wait, I won. Mic drop. Jesse was wonderful. Love his energy and love what he represents. Here's a trivia question for everyone. Do you know who the last US president, the last third-party presidential candidate was to win the election? Who was the last third-party candidate to win?
Yeah, Ross Perot didn't win. He got up there, but he wasn't the winner. I have no idea.
Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the last third-party candidate to win the presidency. He was the first Republican president. And how did he do it is also very interesting. He used the same tactic that was used by the original Union that gave birth to the United States, the 13 colonies. What he did is he went to all the third parties and he created a cabinet or a government of his rivals. He basically united all of the third parties to create unity that allowed them to basically become the winner. And so it's a really interesting story. Most people don't know that aspect of history, but how he did it, it's you know, divided we fall, united we stand. He basically united all of the independent parties or all the third parties. You know, he basically got that Voltron, you know, that Voltron on to basically, you know, win the election.
Voltron classic. I'm sorry. So yeah, it's a good history lesson. History is a great teacher. We don't know where we've been. We don't know where we're going. So not to step away from that, but as far as like the cryptocurrency space, because that's what my channel is all about, where do you see the space going? I mean, we saw where it was. It was a pretty amazing thing to go through Bitcoin and go, okay, well, it's going to be a currency. Well, it didn't really end up being that. It became more of like a store of value or whatever we want to go to next. What's the next evolution, Brock? Where do you see things going in a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I'm incredibly bullish on the sector overall, and obviously have been for some time, or I wouldn't continually be out here evangelizing for it and lending a hand essentially wherever I can. This cycle is very different than the 2017 cycle. It feels much more real. You have major financial institutions that have now validated this. You have major technology giants that have validated this. You've got governments around the world that are validating this, academia, et cetera. The industry has been sufficiently validated. You know, people can say whatever they want to say, but you know, it's clear at this point, we're not going away, right? And so we're building a parallel financial system, but we're also building a platform that can do a whole host of things, which are still more theoretical than actual, but we're starting to see use cases beyond just Bitcoin as a store of value. Decentralized finance is one of the fastest, you know, areas of growth and innovation. It's starting to deliver yields to things that normally would not be generating yield. You know, a lot of times when you talk to people like about gold, is that gold a yield, but as you token these things, so you tokenize assets, you can generate yield easier. So DeFi is happening. The idea of building decentralized application on Ethereum or anything else, you know, that's start viable. I think that will become real over the years to come. And so I'm incredibly, and you know, that is that 26% of all US dollars ever created were created this year. Big reason this parallel financial system is starting to get traction. People are becoming very concerned about the global financial system, and that's why all the dumping into equities. You know, the reason why in COVID, in the midst of what should be a market that is driving stock prices down as businesses are blowing up left and right, we're seeing all-time highs. It's because people are running away from currency. People are running away from bonds. And so they're looking for anywhere to park their money. And so they're parking their money into equities. They're parking their money into commodities. They're running into things like cryptocurrencies. And it is deeply concerning. And this parallel financial system is here right when the world, I'm one that is advocating for the collapse financial system. I believe that would be very bad for all of us. But I think it is important that there are those of us building, call it the safety nets, building plan B there. God forbid something does happen. And at the rate this is moving, you know, we're going to need a plan B. I don't know if it's going to be needed next year or 10 years from now or 20 years from now, but it's very important that we continue to create innovative solutions that are there as a backup. God forbid, you know, the existing system fails for some reason.
Do you find this, I mean, is there like a inner excitement and almost like I told you so, the fact that, let's call it going a decade back with Bitcoin, and when you'd already been in the space of digital assets and then crypto came along, and you're like, you know, this is something that's going to be really tremendous in the future moving forward from a financial system point of view, to now all of a sudden that it took a global pandemic, which I think kind of made people stay at home and almost become captive to a lot of things, right? So they learned a lot more things. And I think crypto is one of those. and now to the point where it's every other day a major Wall Street firm is coming out and recognizing it as some part of the financial system and legitimizing it. And you're like, hey guys, I knew about this a decade ago. You know, it took you this long to figure it out. And I'm not Jamie Dimon.
Yeah, I've been very blessed, you know, throughout my life, not to be confined by the status quo or reality as it's perceived. I see beyond the box, and I view reality for what could be. And so, you know, that's permitted through now decades of look at the world from the perspective. It's allowed me on corners to see the future before it happens. You know, it's akin to having a crystal ball. And I've been right, you know, enough times that it's empowering me to do more. Enough people, when I talk about the future and, you know, a potential prospective future that could exist, you know, people are like, okay, if that's what you see, maybe that's what's going to happen. How can I support that? And so it starts to get easier and easier, because the question is, am I predicting the future, or am I creating or co-creating the future? And that's what's always unclear. But if people start to believe that you see the future, your ability to create the future gets easier and easier.
So, Rob, I know you got a few questions of your own, you know, regarding what the next big thing is, a couple other things. You want to touch on those?
No, I mean, really, we kind of just went through those as we were going through this whole conversation. I mean, the big thing was like, what was it before? What is it now? And what is it going to be? And then the whole thing about, I didn't know about the VC aspect. And of course, we touched on psilocybin. So that's a good amount. I used to work actually for a drug research company, MDS Pharma Services in Phoenix, and we would go through all the whole rigmarole of the different phases for FDA approval. And I can just tell you right now, for all the medications that are out there are a lot of just Me Too medications. So this type of thing that Brock is talking about, just to touch back on that, psilocybin to help with depression, with PTSD, migraines, and also for creativity. That's another type of topic, but just to get that in there for microdosing, these are the types of medications that we need, as opposed to the medications that are being out there already. So that's a little bit away from my normal piece that I do over on Digital Asset News, but it is a good topic. So that's all I really have.
So,
well, I think it's one of the things I talked about on the campaign trail. You know, one of the things that I advocated for was the legalization of nature. You know, the idea that we've outlawed nature, criminalized nature, just feels like an oxymoron to me. It doesn't make any logical sense. And so I've been a big advocate for the re-legalization of nature. I was a big advocate for legalization of cannabis. I'm also an advocate for ending the war on drugs. I think that it's a failed war. Addiction is not shouldn't be a criminal justice issue. It's a mental health and social issue. And how do you get people the help that they need? And if you look at countries like Portugal and Switzerland, there's empirical data of other countries that have gone through the process of decriminalization and found other ways of addressing this issue that is working far better than what we have here in the United States. America is supposed to be the land of the free, yet we have more people in prison per capita and in total than any other country in the world. And I think that we need to rethink some of these things. I'm confident that we can do better, but it starts with actually having the conversation. It requires people talking about this. And this is not something that you hear a typical politician talk about.
Well, you know, so Brock, what you're saying about that, because you were on the trail and you were talking to the average Joe out there, when you would bring up these subjects, how receptive were they actually to them? Because to me, it would seem like a lot of people are standoffish, like, no, that doesn't make sense, because that's not what I've been fed, or I shouldn't say fed, I've learned throughout time. So how have you seen it so much? Are they open to it or not really?
I think the answer is yes. It's how you frame the issue. When you explain how many people we have in prison, how we profit from our criminal justice system, and how people profit from it, and the perverse incentives that exist. If you can summarize an issue in a way that anyone can understand, then they're receptive. The problem is you can't talk over people. You can't talk down to people. You have to meet people where they are and explain things to them in language they can understand. And that's pretty easy to understand, that we have more people in prison than any other country in the world. I think we can agree that we believe that this should be the land of the free. Most of us agree that we like freedom. We like liberty, even as it's being taken away from us. But we all at our core believe that, right? And so if you can phrase those issues, all of a sudden, whoa, that is a problem. That doesn't make sense to me. All right, well, let's talk about some of the problems that exist here. Should nature be illegal? You know, should plants be outlawed? Should it be criminal to pick a plant and eat it? Most people are like, yeah, that does kind of sound a little crazy. That doesn't really make sense to me. And then you start talking about the idea that we've created this war on drugs, which is locking up very large numbers of people, minorities in particular. And with everything going on with BLM and otherwise, I'm like, does that make sense to you? These are nonviolent offenders, people that have not hurt anyone, and they're locked in prison potentially for decades. Does that make sense? I think that the war and how much it supports, you know, narcotics and cartels in Mexico and all the things that this does, you know, does this make sense? No, I think the war on drugs has failed. And so this probably isn't a criminal justice issue. You know, this is, and I'm not saying all drugs are good. I'm not advocating for drugs. It's saying that there might be a better solution to addressing these issues. I don't think locking people in jail for harming themselves is the answer. I think we should probably, at great expense to the American taxpayer, we should probably figure out how to get them the treatment they need, how to help them, because it's really a mental health or a social issue. And how do we do that? We can do that more cost effectively, and we can actually start to solve the issues and not deprive their ability to work. You know, the other thing is, once we give people a criminal record, they generally become unemployable or have a very hard time being employed. And often once we send them to jail, they learn, they develop a whole network of relationships that encourages them to stay, you know, engaged with criminal activity versus becoming productive members of society. So, I mean, I think it's pretty basic stuff. And when it's explained well and simply, the message resonates with most people, at least well enough that they're not going to argue. They're going to say, okay, I processed that. I'm not sure I agree, but you know, I didn't find many people challenging it. I think that, and by the way, the American people, you know, 2/3, I don't know if you saw, but 2/3 of Americans plus now believe in legalizing cannabis. Cannabis won on ballots across the country. They even decriminalized mushrooms or psilocybin in multiple parts of the country. I mean, this is, the American people are voting in line with this position. Our politicians are not advocating for it. The American people, you know, are showing up and generally agree with the statements that I've just made.
Yeah, it's been a long fight, I think, for the American people, and it's particularly in the cannabis thing. It seems like there's always a bunch of roadblocks because it is a state by state thing, as far as legalizing it from that point of view. Interesting takes. What's keeping you busy now? What are you focused on now on a day-to-day basis? You know, as Brock, this is what I'm involved in, regardless of the industry sector. What's the exciting passion right now for you?
Yeah, so when I went to run for office, it's not a part-time job. Certainly never having done it before and not having the entire apparatus of a political party. I mean, I think we broke many records. I mean, just in terms of ballot access, time, coming in late during COVID. And so I told most of the people I work with, I'm about to do something crazy that's going to make me unavailable for a little while. And they're like, what? I'll let you know as we get closer to the date certain. Then I started saying, well, I might run for political office. They're like, oh, really? They're like, what kind of office? I don't know. You know, I think people thought I might be running for Congress or something. And then like 1 week before this happened, I let people know that I'm going to be announcing that I'm running for president and that I'm going to be unavailable for the next 6 months. And then, you know, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm announcing tomorrow. This is happening. Good luck. I'll talk to you in 6 months. And so for me, the first phase is just getting back into the saddle again. And fortunately, none of my businesses imploded. People didn't run off with all the money. You know, progress in some instances slowed down, and some teams being empowered actually did an incredible job. It was an opportunity, a moment to shine. And so getting caught up to speed with my business again, getting engaged with my philanthropic activities. I try to devote at least 10% of my time to charitable activities. I would love to see that be 20%. And then obviously some time with family. I have 2 kids, and that obviously was impacted by running for office as well. You know, during COVID, kids running around on campaign trails is not ideal. And then the political aspect of my life. Again, as I said, this is just the beginning. It's far from over. I will be very active in the political landscape for this country going forward, because I believe that we are doomed if we don't do something. And I believe we can do something. I believe we will do something. And I encourage all of us to, like, if you don't like what you see, you know, do something about it. And our government, that system that governs over us, really, really matters. You know, the future is going to happen to you, or the future is going to happen with you. So let's get involved and let's co-create the future that we all want to live in. Let's start electing a government of, for, and by the people that are actually showing up because they care, you know, and showing up in service, not because they're seeking money or power. And so I encourage you, if you're one of those people, to get involved, run for city council, run for local mayor, get involved in your state politics. You know, let's get involved. We have the power to change it. We really do. We can create a government that we all want if we get involved and agree. And more importantly, start acting according to our conscience, not voting out of fear, not voting against something, but understanding what we stand for and voting for what we believe in. You know, we've been continually divided by voting against things and voting out of fear. And I think one of the most important lessons in life is we are here to act according to our conscience. So let's do that.
True words haven't been spoken. It is about being involved and getting involved. And that's the easiest step to change things, for sure. I mean, I could speak to you for hours and pick your brain, hear your views, but I really appreciate the time, Brock. Thank you so much for carving this out of your schedule and being with us and doing this and expressing your views. They're really interesting.
Thank you, Brock.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity, because you know, getting the message out, right, getting the word out, it matters. So thank you for being a voice and to help bring information to people at a time where we need more of it. You know, let's be informed. Let's stay informed. Again, thank you so much for having me on, and I hope to do it again.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Brock. Appreciate it.